Nope, that's not helping. That's making it worse. All right. The eternal struggle of this chair. Hey Ecofictologists, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're comfortable. We've got a long one today. My name is Lovis, and yes, I am back in the chair because I am talking about something writing related, kind of. Today I'm gonna be asking a lot of questions today. Not providing many answers, but I'm gonna be asking a lot of questions. I simply don't have the answers to them. I have my own opinions and my own biases, but I don't have answers. I don't know if there are answers. I want to have a conversation with you, so I'm going to ask you lots of questions. This is going to be a two-part series because the topic was too big for one. I didn't think I could keep you here that long. I think I'm probably going to struggle today already. So the topic of this two-part series is: how important is scientific accuracy in fiction? I have the distinct feeling I'm poking a hornet's nest here, but it's such a fascinating hornet's nest that I'm willing to do it. I really want to spend more time on my channel talking about fiction as a science communication tool, bridging the gap between the public and scientists using the framework of storytelling. This is where my unique nexus of passions and talents and skills lies, and I really don't think that I have made the most out of it. And I just have so many questions around this topic. I find it so fascinating. And so instead of, putting together a thesis and sitting here and presenting it to you like I have all the answers, I thought it would be more entertaining for you and more interesting for me to just take you along on my journey as I discover these things. And if I come across something cool, I'll share it with you. And if I go down a rabbit hole, as I have in the last couple of weeks, I'll share that with you too. So, today's question: how important is scientific accuracy in fiction? At first, an obvious answer would probably be, well, it depends on whether the purpose of the book or the film or whatever the piece of fiction is was to teach something. And if yes, then it should probably be accurate, because maybe that defeats the purpose of trying to teach something. And if not, then why does it matter? But how do you tell the difference between those two scenarios as a reader or a viewer or a listener or whatever? It's also important to know when you should relax your expectations of accuracy and when to pay attention. Otherwise, you might learn lessons you weren't supposed to and completely miss the ones you were supposed to learn. Because whether consciously or subconsciously, your reader is going to absorb something. Whether it's details that they think are actually true, or just a feeling or a subconscious opinion about something that they didn't even realize they were assimilating. So knowing that your audience is going to take in something, is it your responsibility of knowing what that something is and making sure that it's true? In today's video, I'm looking at the first of those scenarios, fiction for science communication, and then next week I'll look at the other scenario, which is fiction that was not really meant to communicate any kind of scientific fact, but maybe had some unintended consequences, so maybe you should have thought about that. And I split them up because, my word, this video would be long. So let's look at the first scenario, fiction for science communication. And let me be clear here that I mean fiction that could be considered to be for science communication. I can't check the actual motivation of the creators of some of these pieces. So a scientific field is portrayed in a way that could be true. It's not, science isn't like a byproduct, it's part of the main plot. That definition will probably become clearer as I talk. So on the one hand, yeah, if you're gonna teach, don't teach wrong stuff. That makes sense, is, fairly logical. On the other though, depending on what you're teaching, maybe 100% accuracy isn't that important as long as the core concepts are solid. An example would be shows like CSI or Bones. A common accuracy complaint is that everything happens at lightning speed, completely unrealistic speeds. You don't get DNA test results in an hour, and you don't create an algorithm in a day. But I can forgive that for the sake of dramatic pacing. I love the science, but I don't want to watch it at realistic pace. It took me 4 years to build the model that I built for my PhD. Most boring TV show ever. I'll consider it wish fulfillment that it was done in a day. So you already see that I have my own ideas about what's okay to fib on and what's not. But for fiction like this, unfortunately, the suspension of disbelief is such that if you don't know a lot about the field of science that they're portraying, it could be true. Chemistry, entomology, forensics, physics, just they touch on so many fields, and I'm not an expert in any of those. I'm so far from an expert in any of those. And for the space of time that I'm watching, my brain says, yep, that's how it is. I'm fine with that. I'll accept it. This is how it is. When the episode or book or whatever is done though, how much of that lingers and how much does my brain say, okay, that was a fictional representation of real life. Don't apply it to real life. How much does my brain sort out? You know what I mean? Let me give you an example of this. I recently came across a phenomenon called the CSI Effect, and it blew my mind. Basically, shows like CSI that depict crime scene investigations and forensics and all of these things, they are actually having an effect on how jurors make decisions in a courtroom, especially when they're responding to forensic evidence or lack thereof. They think no forensic evidence, no case. Because in every CSI episode, it's all about the forensics, and the forensics are the things that break the case. So if you don't have them, do you have a case at all? But in reality, forensics and DNA tests and all these things are very expensive and they're very slow. So sometimes they're not necessary, and it's other things that break the case, and you still have a solid case without forensics. But these jurors are giving weight, kind of real weight of decision making on things that they think they know because they've seen it in this TV show. There are so many papers about this. I'll link a few below. This was just mind-boggling. So in this case, CSI might not have created the show in order to show how forensics actually works. And judging by some of the videos I've seen on YouTube from real forensic scientists watching CSI, they have something to say about that. But clearly it has led to behavioral change. On the positive side, there was a massive increase in interest in forensic science degrees, and one would hope that the accuracy in a university degree would be much higher than on a TV show, because the TV show made it look sexy and exciting, and that's great. That's a really great impact to generate excitement for a scientific field. Similarly, the TV show Bones, which was forensic anthropology and using lots of cool bones techniques to solve crimes. I just described that really poorly. It's a great show. That was linked to a massive increase in specifically women going into forensic anthropology, because the main character, this badass female scientist, is Bones. And the TV show Numbers, which solves crimes using mathematical formulas and algorithms and stuff, made that, there were articles that said that it made mathematics look chic and generated excitement about applied mathematics, and all your school teachers always told you that it'll come in handy one day. But the CSI Effect is probably an unintended consequence. I'm assuming that it was an unintended consequence. So maybe a question to ask, and again, I'm just throwing questions at you. I have no idea. So maybe a question to ask in trying to determine whether scientific accuracy is important is the piece of fiction about something that is relevant to us now? For example, paleontologists might have a thing or two to say about the accuracies or otherwise of Jurassic Park, but whether or not the T-Rex had feathers doesn't impact my daily life all that much. Basically, the reason that I'm talking about this is that I'm trying to figure out how to do it, how to do this, how to use storytelling as a form of science communication, because it's an absolute minefield trying to figure out where on this sliding scale of science and fiction I want to be, and how to tell my readers we are here on this scale. We are somewhere between science and fiction. Learn something, but don't take everything at 100% face value. If you remember, like way back, when I did a little video about an idea for a cereal, I said I wanted to write the ecological version of CSI. That project has been pushed to the back burner for now, but it's still simmering away up there. Sometimes I still write down some ideas. But thinking about the CSI effect is really interesting because it did create behavioral change, which I want to do, but it created also an unintended behavioral change, which I'm not so keen on doing. What is it about CSI that convinced people this is real, this is how it is, and this is the only way that it could be in reality? Is it the jargon? Is it this feeling of, oh, an expert is telling me something, therefore it must be true? What is it that suspends disbelief so completely that the viewer assimilates what is being shown to them? In that video about my cereal idea, I think I mentioned that I wanted to set it in a fantasy world, so that I didn't have to deal with all the nastiness of our reality necessarily. I could pick and choose the nasties that I wanted to put into my world. But is that already a step too far? Does that already suspend disbelief too much? That the reader like turns off the learning part too much? I don't know. Again, questions. My work in progress right now is an eco-fantasy novel, and the setting is completely fantastical. The species will most likely be completely fantastical, but what I'm talking about in terms of population dynamics and how ecosystems function is true. So how do I tell my reader, don't worry about the specifics, but learn the core concepts of how these things fit together? How far on the sliding scale between like magical realism and then urban fantasy, all the way up to epic fantasy, can you go before the reader completely disengages and considers it all fiction? And while we are wired to draw parallels between fantasy worlds and our reality, does that extend past social commentary and political intrigue to scientific concepts? Worth testing. Hypothesis worth testing. But I'm now getting into a psychological field that I know absolutely nothing about, but which is fascinating to think about. How do you do what CSI has done, and shows like CSI? It's called the CSI Effect, but it's other shows as well. But do it intentionally and do it with the behavioral change you're actually trying to produce. By now you might be wondering, hoping even, that I, at some point, will stop pelting you with questions and provide some answers, but I can't. I can't, because I don't have any. I have opinions. I have lots of opinions, in fact, and I have opinions that are based on my area of expertise, my passions, my connection with the natural world. I have my own set of parameters within which I am willing to suspend disbelief. And every person is going to have those. Maybe they won't describe them as nerdily as I just did. The only thing I will share and say is true for me is that I think they're important questions to ask. And I think it's an important topic to think about. Because intention or lack of intention is not always enough of an excuse should the consequence of whatever you put out into the world not be so great. If you hurt people, the fact that you didn't intend to hurt people doesn't stop you from having hurt them. Does that make sense? Just remember Peter Benchley, the creator of Jaws, who regretted making Jaws because it made people so afraid of sharks and made shark conservation so much harder. That would haunt me. But he probably didn't think that he was teaching anybody anything when he wrote it. More on that next week. So, food for thought. I hope you learned something. I hope it made you think a little bit. I hope maybe we can get a conversation going. Let me know down in the comments any thoughts you have, any other examples you know of, or whether this has made you think about your own writing a little differently. I am diving headfirst into this rabbit hole, so stay tuned for next week for part 2, where we talk about all those pieces of fiction that didn't try and teach anybody anything, but they did anyway, and we're not so happy about it. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. I post every Wednesday, and I talk all about reading and writing ecofiction and how ecofiction can be used as a tool for science communication. If you like what I do and would like to support me, then head on over to patreon.com/ecofictology and become a patron. Your monthly donation will buy me books, and it will also support Love the Oceans, a marine conservation organization operating out of Mozambique. You can also find me over on the Rewilding Our Stories Discord server. Everyone is welcome. You will find lots of wonderful community members there who also love ecofiction. We chat about solar punk, we chat about our book club, we chat about films and video games and novels and everything. You can find everything. Invite is in the description below. I will see you next week for part 2, Ecofictologists. Using storytelling for science communication, and it is an absolute minefield. Where am I looking? Why am I suddenly yellow?